Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Our Life Beyond, the podcast where we explore how to navigate and hopefully thrive through some of life's biggest transitions. I'm your co-host, Scott Dibben, and I've teamed up with my great friend and mentor, Connie King, to share some stories, strategies, and insights that helped us adapt to the ever-changing seasons of our life.
Whether your life transition is divorce, death of a loved one, switching careers, moving to a new city, or just trying to figure out what the hell is next, we're with you every step of the way. But always remember, we're not therapists, just fellow travelers with a knack for finding humor in the chaos, and maybe some untraditional method of overcoming what life dishes out to us. Hopefully, you'll have fun embarking on this journey. So now, let's get started.
I want to give a special thank you to Habit Coffee for sponsoring us. So if you're local to Springfield, you're probably aware of the miserable construction at Highway 60 and Farm Road 125 heading into Rogersville.
Yeah, right in the midst of all that progress is the Habit Coffee Company, a fantastic local, vagina-owned business. They're more than just a coffee shop. They serve delicious, scratch-made breakfast and lunch options. They have a state and county-inspected kitchen, and they love catering events. While it might take a bit of extra effort to reach them right now, they're excited about the upcoming expansion when the highway reopens this fall. Support the Habit Coffee Company and enjoy their incredible offerings today.
Thank you so much, Habit Coffee. Hello, Connie.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am great. I am very excited about our next guest. I think I say that about each of our guests, though.
We have some amazing guests, though. We really have. So tell me about this one.
Yeah, let me tell you. Our guest today is Nigel. His journey is both unique and deeply relatable. Growing up, Nigel navigated the challenges of 5 divorces within his family. And that's a reality that profoundly impacted his childhood and shaped his understanding of relationships. So in this heartfelt conversation, Nigel opens up about how these experiences influenced his perspective on life and relationships, and how he worked through the emotional terrain of his past. But beyond the trials, Nigel also shares a touching tribute to his mother and the way he honors her through his personal growth and resilience. His story is one of overcoming adversity, finding strength in the midst of change, and celebrating the bonds that remain steadfast. I am so excited to hear his story. So, without further ado, let's talk to Nigel.
Well, hello, Nigel. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Scott. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I want to go ahead. Oh,
Hi,
yeah.
Connie.
Connie's on here too, Nigel, just so you know.
I know. I'm kind of
Oh, the co-host?
Yeah.
So I wanted to introduce just in the beginning. So I've got a personal relationship with Nigel because he's my son's partner. So I know a lot of the story that he may talk through, or some of it, not all of it. But I'm telling you right now, it's an amazing story. He's got a great family, and I look forward to people hearing this. So, Nigel, what do you think? Do you want to start off maybe at like your biological mom and dad, where you were at in that, and how you felt about it?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, much like how I've heard you refer on this podcast, I was also born in a Midwest town in the middle of the United States, just nondescript.
Yeah.
I grew up pretty poor, farmer background, Baptist background. My grandparents were missionaries, both sets of them. My mother grew up in Central America. My father grew up in Mexico. They spent their parents spent most of their life like in service. So they grew up basically like from 5 years old, like in those countries, almost all the way through high school. So their whole life that they knew was dedicated to like Christian service. They met that way. Their families were in the same convention. And so they connected a lot on the mission field. And I just kind of feel like the way that they told me, and again, just my perspective and how I remember things, I just kind of feel like it was expected. Like it just was kind of like made sense. Like, this is what you do. You get married, you have a family. And so they tend to do that pretty young. So my parents, I think, were married probably 19 or 20.
Okay. Wow.
Um, and they had me, I think, when my mom was 21, 22-ish. But I don't know. I think that just being married, feeling like this is what you're supposed to do, and just following through the motions, it didn't really play out how they wanted to. And so they ended up divorcing before I even really have any memory. Like I get these little snippets. My sister, she's 2 years older than me. She remembers just a little bit more, but quite honestly, I don't I don't remember that part. And so after that, which I think I start remembering my mom dating my second or my first stepdad. I'm just going to drop names because I don't think they're ever going to listen to this. But Ron. So Ron was the first one. They married pretty early on as well. Of course, we moved to another small town and things
How
were all right. Go ahead.
how old were you at that time, Nigel?
So I might have been in like pre-K,
Oh, wow. Okay, so you were
Okay.
really young.
like because they weren't married and we moved into a house and
Okay.
I didn't go to school at that point. So yeah.
Okay. So Ron.
Oh yeah. So Ron at some point, for whatever reason, joins the military. And we ended up moving to Texas and we were on an army base there. And I actually kind of like that because like I had relationship with my father still. Like I have a relationship with my father clear until high school. Um and it was nice because he would come visit us like while we were still in Missouri. But when we moved to Texas, I really didn't get to see him as much. Maybe where I used to be able to see him like once a month or so, I just kind of it'd be a year or so before I'd see him. And I always kind of like knew that like Ron wasn't necessarily like my dad. And it never quite felt like that. I felt like, and the common theme throughout the rest of this is like they had their interests, the things that they wanted me to learn. Like he was always working on a truck, and my mom and him would ask me to come sit outside, and I'd sit next to a truck and hand him a wrench or hand him something, and I was never paying attention. So I'd never really felt like I got along or understood him, and that he understood me because once he joined the military, he kind of developed like that militant attitude. So,
Mm.
things needed to be a certain way. But I did kind of not mind that part because he was often deployed. So we just lived, you know, in this duplex and he was never there. So, I mean, it was just me and my mom and my sister. So, it's crazy because for the rest of this story as well, it's just like, it feels like she was always married, but yet I always felt like I had a single mother.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I just always felt it was like me, my mom, and my sister against the world. So, um, he, yeah, so we were in Texas and then we moved back to Missouri. We moved to, yeah, it doesn't drop one, but he had left the military at that point and we were getting ready to move back to Texas and he moved to Houston to go find the house and whatever. And so I guess while he was there, he bought a house and a truck and got a girlfriend.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
And I was at school and my mom came and picked me up. And I remember them calling me out, like calling me, and I was just like, well, I'm not sick and I'm not allowed to like leave school unless I'm sick. And like it was really strange because I'm like, no one's dead. And so we drove from Joplin back to this my like I would say my hometown per se, but my hometown. And they sat me down with my grandparents and they were like, Ron doesn't want to be a part of the picture anymore. He isn't coming back from Texas and we're not going there. And so we stayed in my hometown for a while, and then we moved to closer to Springfield, Republic. And then she met Nathan. And Nathan, she met at church. She was, that was important to her. She wanted, I think that I think Ron, the start wasn't necessarily based in the church.
Sure.
So I think after that, she really wanted to try to like make good choices and raise us because, like I said, we were heavily, heavily invested in the Baptist community and the Baptist faith. So I think that she really was trying to find like good quality in a person and really find them in church like you're supposed to, because then you can trust them and you know they're good, allegedly.
Yeah.
So ideally.
Yeah.
So she met Nathan. And I remember being really excited because he lived in a really big house in Springfield and they had cable and air conditioning. And I just remember being so excited because he had all this technology and he seemed really cool. But, I could, again, tell like he was more and probably interested in my mother than having like a family. And my mom has recently said that, or like in the past, was just like, yeah, he thought that he knew what it was like to be a father because his sister had children and he had been an uncle.
Okay.
And so he wasn't necessarily prepared for like kids who don't behave or, kids who are going through puberty and having hormones
Yeah.
so oh, go ahead.
No, I was just I even forgot to ask. So did Ron have any of his own kids on the first marriage?
No.
No. Okay. And Nathan
no.
didn't have any of his own kids, the second
No.
one? Okay.
No. And going back to Ron really quick. I didn't know really that they were having problems, but I did remember one time hearing them fight. And I remember being really confused by it because I had never heard anybody fight before. And so I didn't really understand what it was,
Yeah.
Um, and my mom later on has really apologized. Like in my 20s, she was like, "Oh my gosh, I never knew that you could hear that. Like I never wanted you to hear that." And so I had never seen anyone fight before. And so whenever mom was with Nathan and they got married, and so instead of moving to Springfield or a bigger city, they moved us back into Crane because they thought that we'd be safer there. Like as kids, he was worried that we'd get into like drugs and whatever. So they moved us to a small town in Stone County as to avoid getting into drugs. But we did not. I mean, it was fine. I also feel like that wasn't necessarily a great move just because it was so isolating and in a smaller town. And at that point, that's when I started realizing that I might not be straight.
Okay. And at what age was that?
Probably, I think I started having an idea about it in like 6th and 7th grade.
Okay.
I had a crush on the neighbor. So we moved back to Crane. And then we just kind of settled into it. But I, once again, I had a stepfather who was taking me to Bass Pro and fitting me up for hunting gear and taking me out into the woods to go like turkey hunting. And I don't like to sit still and I don't like to be quiet. And I have a circulatory disorder and I don't like getting cold. And so that was just my own personal hell. But he never really asked me like what I was into. And so, he would buy video games that felt like he was just buying video games that he wanted and was just always trying to project. I remember at one point I was singing some Dolly Parton, Just Because I'm a Woman, which honestly is just Dolly Parton, and it had nothing to do with a reflection of myself, but I feel like he was so afraid and kind of like noticing all these behaviors about me and didn't like it that he got so pissed one day that I was singing that song. He was like, "Well, why would you sing this song? Like, why would you sing this?" And I'm like, I'm just a teenager. I'm just singing a song. It's catchy. Like, I'm not thinking too much about it.
Yeah.
And so and just picking up these little bitty things like that. I'm like, okay, this isn't okay. And so at the same time that this is happening, my dad, who was single and hadn't really dated, he remarried and she had a kid. And my sister and I had a room at my dad's house, but when he moved in with his new wife and her kid. She had boxed up all of our things and told us to take it home, that we had a room at our mother's house and that this was now her son's room, and it wasn't fair that we should have 2 rooms when he only gets 1.
Oh, wow.
And it was made very, very clear that she had found her son a father. And where at this point, I used to love going to my dad's house. Like, I felt like he was so cool. He was like my best friend, which is really, like, in retrospect, my mom was doing the work. My mom was, taking care of us. And he, of course, got us on the weekends, and he was an over the road trucker and he made money. And so he was able to buy the things that my mom couldn't. And I honestly feel like I always recognized that. I never felt like my mom didn't provide or that it wasn't good enough. I did like going to my dad's house. It was fun, but I never really was just like, why can't you do this for me? He does this for me. And so I really felt like that she's always done a good job of making me feel safe.
Mhm.
And so when he remarried, he became like a different person. Like, he seemed really tired all the time. He seemed really closed off. I would ask him if we could hang out, like, without, my new brother, my stepbrother, and his wife. And it would never happen. He couldn't. He just would never do it. And so finally I started asking him, because we would go every other weekend. He would come to Crane and pick us up. And I finally was just like, if I could just have the ride from Crane to Springfield with you, if I could just have that. And
Yeah.
he always brought his wife.
So you never really had any alone time with your dad at that point on?
And I would never again.
Was there any shared hobbies with your dad?
Yeah. Yeah. He, bought me a game. Like, he had a Game Boy of his own, an original one. I remember playing this racing game that featured a race car driver, Nigel Mansell, and I always got a kick out of the fact that the race car driver was my name. We played like Mario together. We would stay up really, really late playing Super Nintendo, working on the levels together. Like, we would go see movies, and like my sister was right there. Like, she was right there in it. Like, we'd go to Whitewater. Like, we were hanging out. We were doing things. He, asked me about the stuff I liked. Like, he knew that I was really into like orangutans and apes. So he would get things, and like a lot of it was gifts. I'm not going to lie. He didn't have a lot of time with us. So I feel like that was his way. But it did always feel like it was something that I was interested in. Like, he'd take us to the zoo so I could look at the orangutans. I was just really obsessed with apes, like really obsessed, hyper focused, except. But yeah, and like I said, it was just a 180 change of personality. And so I don't have that family support there. And then my mom's marriage started going a little bit weird with Nathan. He just started getting angrier and more closed off. He ended up he turned the garage into a den and like put in surround sound and started spending all this money on like technology and TVs. And up until this point, we never had a TV. And he started getting more and more upset with me. And I never really could understand why I was in trouble. One day he was upset that I was taking too many showers. And I guess I was halfway through a shower, all lathered up, and he somehow, I don't know if it was the access underneath the sink, but he cut the water off. And I came out toweling off. I was like, something's wrong with the water. And he just went in, like, you're wasting utilities and you're doing this and like, you're not thinking about it. And, you're being so disrespectful and you never think of anyone else. You're so selfish. And I started at this point. This is probably the part that's toughest because, again, like, I love my mother and it all ends up fine. But at this point, it felt like she couldn't defend me. And so I was just kind of, I think everybody was starting to emotionally check out, like the whole house. Everybody was just going into this like robot state. I was just kind of doing, I think there's this term called fawning, which is just like looking ahead to see the problems and just like working your ass off to not create problems because you're so scared of getting in trouble. My mom decided that she couldn't take it, and she decided to join the army.
Okay,
And
I
around that,
remember that I remember her talking about going to the army. So
yeah,
that was after after Nathan and
it
you
was
were.
during Nathan.
Okay. So you were probably in about the 7th grade then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think I was mid high school. I think I was mid
Oh,
high
okay.
school
Wow.
because we moved again. I've got there about halfway through 6th grade, and so at this point, I've been switching schools about halfway through every year. But yeah, so about this time, and the order's a little bit fuzzy, but it all happened so quick about the same time. But I finally was ready to admit and tell my parents that I was gay. And so I called my mom and I made her come home, and she gets there and I sit down and I probably talk for about 30 minutes about, there's this feeling inside and I don't know what it is. And God says this and I don't know. And I just feel so bad. And and my mom's finally like, you just need to say what it is. And I told her I was gay and she started crying. I might cry right now too, but she started crying and she said to me, I thought you were going to tell me you were on drugs. But now that you've told me you're gay, I only wish that you were on drugs because at least there's rehab for that.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of progressive a little bit in the time. It hurt really bad right then, but looking back, it kind of feels okay because at least she was saying that it wasn't necessarily a choice and that she knew that there was no fix for it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Growing up in a Baptist, especially, I think if I remember right, it's your family was pretty strict Baptist,
Yeah,
right?
we were like fundamental independent. So it was very much like rules, rules, rules,
Yeah.
and like hyper rules, like don't play cards in public, even if you're just playing solitaire or go fish. You don't want people to think you're gambling, so don't play cards. Like you have to look to see if other people might perceive you as doing something wrong. So yeah, pretty strict.
So was Nathan in that conversation too when
Oh
you sat
hell
down with your
no,
mom?
hell no! I was terrified. She starts saying, "Your grandma's not going to accept this." And Nathan is not going to accept this. We might have to move. We might have to get an apartment. We might have to leave. And in that moment, I did recognize, and I was really grateful that she chose me.
Yeah, absolutely.
She offered, she said, do you want help? Because she had been recently painting someone's house that worked in the church that we were going to. And the couple's special like ministry was that they worked with gay people and trying to lead them out of gayness and back into Christ. And so she said that they had a class and that I could go to it and she would take me. And it was like 2 hours every Thursday for about 16 weeks. Thank God it wasn't like conversion therapy. It was just more of like a class full of just people with general problems. Later on, my mom would tell me that she didn't want to take me to anything more specific because she was worried that it would be too harsh. So yet again, like, even though we're working through the steps of like what we have in our toolbox, and that's the way that I really reframe it is my mom had a certain set of tools and a certain understanding, and she was, single a lot or, trying to find, probably what she might have thought like, the complete household, the way
Yeah.
that it was supposed to look. And so I think with the tools that she had and the understanding the place where she was at in life, that she was doing her best. And so I was grateful that she went with me and she sat in the classes with me.
Oh, okay.
And um and so I think it was about 2 weeks after these classes ended. I was in Springfield and went on a date for the first time with a guy, and yeah, ended up experiencing my first kiss there, which was horrifying, and I was like, I'm going to hell now. But it was just so funny because I was like, I want this to work out so bad. And I remember uh, that I got up at the last class and I stood up and I said, I just want to let everyone know I'm here because I had kept it secret the whole time. I said, I'm here because I've been experiencing these feelings of like homosexuality and like a gay attraction, and that I know that I can't help how I feel, but I can decide what my actions are. And so if Christ gave his all for me, then I should be able to give my all for him, and I just won't act on them ever. And then I wiped away a tear, and the foundation that I was wearing wiped off in my napkin. Which is also a big confusion. Like I walked in because, my friends were wearing makeup, and I had a car and I was able to drive to Springfield and hang out with, these progressive like punk kids. And I was just like this little like quiet weirdo, but the girls I were with, they're like putting makeup on me, and, I was just vibing with that. And I came home one day with eyeliner on, and my mom was just like, hey, you really need to take that off because if your stepdad sees it, he won't understand. And I know it's probably just like a thing that you're doing with your friends and it's fun, whatever, but people might get the wrong impression. And so, yet once again, this theme of like, don't be yourself, people won't like you, push it down, be acceptable, do what you're supposed to. So that was all happening. And then that class happened. And then, yeah, I just started going, I just went for it. And I moved out. My mom once the kids are out, so I guess it happened afterwards. There was a moment where the military needed doctors, but they didn't want doctors right out of school, and they didn't want old ass doctors. So they raised the limit of the age, and my mom, to get out of her marriage, because when I tell you that he was spending all this money on other stuff, he would come home, there'd be McDonald's wrappers in the floorboard of his truck where he'd eaten dinner on the way home, and then wasn't giving money for groceries. And my mom, she didn't have a job at that point.
Yeah.
And so she worked in the flea market that my grandma owned, and she'd be like, hey, if you're hungry for dinner or breakfast, I've got some food at the shop, and so you can come there. And but I guess at one point he was yelling at her, and he said, well, no wonder you have a kid who's gay when they have a mother like you. And so I think that really, like, I can't imagine sorry if I'm crying a little bit. But I can't imagine what that treatment was like for her. And she had to suffer it alone. Since the age limit went up, she was able then to join the military. And so she went there. And while she was in Iraq, she went to boot camp, AIT, went to Iraq, was there. And somewhere in the middle of that, she found out something that he had done, which was like a major betrayal of trust, and something that she had at the very beginning put on the line and said that this is not okay, and was found out that he had done that. And that was her like ticket out, because again, she is this Baptist woman, and you're not really allowed to just get a divorce.
Yeah.
Like the Bible only makes room for like a couple of things where it's just like if your husband's not providing, if he's beating you, if he's cheating. So she divorced him.
And at that time you had moved out though, and she was
Yeah.
overseas. And so she had like a deployment over there that she had to do.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and a part I missed that was kind of big was I was living in Springfield. They asked me to come down to Crane and babysit their dog. And sorry, as I piece this together and I remember things, it all comes back. I don't tend to think about this a lot.
Yeah.
But the day that I called my mom, the catalyst was I was standing in the kitchen, and I remember Amy Winehouse's Wake Up Alone was playing. And like when the light ray comes through the window and you can see like the dust particles, like because you can see the beam of light. I was standing in the kitchen and I was holding, I was chopping up apples for a snack and I was holding a knife. And I just thought for like this moment, if I went right now, if I just ended it now, I wouldn't have to tell anybody and they wouldn't have to be embarrassed.
Oh, wow. I can't believe you had that thought in your head.
Yeah. I thought I can't fix this. I have prayed and I have prayed. And I was so frustrated because I cry myself to sleep every night wanting to know like what I had done, like why this was happening. Like, clearly all these male figures in my life were just, I wasn't like them. And they always seem to be so mad at me for it, for like existing. So I was just like, what if I didn't? Because if I tell them, I'll lose everybody. And so if I'm going to lose everybody, I may as well go this way. So that way they won't have to know and they won't be upset and they won't have to think about me that way.
Hmm.
But I can't. I'm grateful that I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Self-harm is not necessarily something that I guess I have in me like that. Like, because I came right up to the edge and I peered over and just something said no. So I didn't. Called my mom. That's why I told her. So flash forward, she's going to be deployed and he's driving her to the airport and they want me to stay in Crane and babysit the dog. And I'm staying in the kitchen making some dinner and I don't really know how it happened, but that song came back on and the light hit just right and I freaked out. I panicked. I hopped in the car. I drove back to Springfield. I found my roommate. I was like, hey, I'm in a weird place right now. Like, I'm not necessarily a danger to myself, but like, I don't know how that situation so perfectly recreated itself, but it was so upsetting. I just left.
Yeah.
And so I called them about something because I needed to know something. And they found out that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I wasn't in Crane anymore. And my mom had gotten on an airplane and I wouldn't be able to speak to her probably for the next 6 months to a year because she was in boot camp in AIT. They can't call you during that time. And so he said to me, well, why aren't you there? And I couldn't explain it to him.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't. And so I lied. I said I was supposed to be at work. He's like, well, you called me during this time. You weren't at work. He said, your mom, when she found out that you lied to her, something in her eyes died and she will never be able to look at you the same. And
Mm.
basically told me that my mom didn't love me anymore. And all I
That
knew is
was
that's what he said. And
was that a
so
manipulation technique on his part to make you feel bad for not doing what he wanted you to be doing? Do you think that
absolutely.
now? Okay.
I mean, absolutely. I also think that he was just really cruel.
Okay.
Your mom was taking a lot on at that time, if you think about it. Relationships weren't working. Of course, she was probably getting pressured by her family because of the Baptist.
Oh, and my grandparents loved him. Finally, my mother, we were able to talk, and it just wasn't the same. Like I had it in my head that she didn't love me anymore, and we hadn't talked
Yeah.
for so long, and so she got out of the military, and no, yeah, she got out. She came back from Iraq, and she got put into Fort Worth, Texas, which is where the army base where we lived with Ron. And my mom had some trouble with the paperwork. And so she contacted Ron. They started talking. And the next thing I know, they're getting married again.
Okay. So number 2 and number 4 were the same person.
Yes. And so at this point, I'm just like, what is happening? Like I've already
Yeah.
started building my own life, but I'm just heavily drinking. I am in and out of bars. I am not going quite to work when I'm supposed to. I'm living couch to couch. I had enrolled in cosmetology school at this point. I just very gratefully was able to pay for it with student loans. Um, and, like having the hardest times establishing relationships.
Is that because of the
Yeah.
experience you'd had with Nathan, or was
I
it
mean, the
that
whole
you've
thing.
okay.
I had never seen a successful relationship. I had never seen a happy relationship. I'd never seen a healthy relationship, even with my dad and his wife. I mean, at one point, his wife was so controlling. At one point, I said to my dad, and like at this, like that marriage, we're no longer getting like Christmas presents. We're getting like stockings, like candy, but just a Walmart sack of candy and some stuff and some trinkets in there, you know?
Mhm.
Because we're no longer really going to his house. My mom finally said, "You don't have to go anymore if you don't want to." And because I would come home crying every time because, she was just always just this person. You know, and even what was with Nathan, people like would describe her as like, evil stepmother. And then Nathan, my friends just called him my landlord. Like, you know, and so here she is married to this person again, and I'm like, I don't really understand it. And so, yeah, I just was working my way through life.
Did you give him another chance at that point, or were you, I mean, over it?
I was so emotionally turned off from the whole situation. Didn't make any sense. I didn't have a close relationship with my mom. I just I didn't like it,
Yeah.
you know? But it was just like such a disassociation and such like an emotionally dead time for me. Like, I was in hair school. I was eating a pack of ramen a day. I barely could get employment. I didn't have a car. I was walking to school. I was walking to work. Like, I would get tips in school. And so like on the weekend, I might be able to afford a cheeseburger at McDonald's. And that was like the splurge that made me feel like a human being. So like I had problems of my own.
Yeah.
Like I was like, you're making your problems, you're doing your own thing. I don't really know what to do about this. I have my grandparents coming to visit me in Springfield, and they're telling me that I'm selfish and self-centered, and that like I'll die before 50 because sin will wreck my body, and that I'm selfish. I'll never know true love and what real love is, because there's no real love outside of Christ. And if I even ran into a burning building to save a baby, it would be a selfish act.
Good Lord. So
So, like, I'm having like a struggle at this point. And, she was with him for a couple years, but he showed his true colors pretty quickly, and she divorced him as well. She stayed with him for quite a while, like quite a bit longer than she really wanted to, because she's like, I've just divorced so many times.
Yeah.
I can't, like, I have to make sure that I'm really doing this and trying everything. And so she really did try hard to make it work, but ultimately, like, it wasn't going to. She had always had to restart her life every single time. She never took anything. She never fought for money. Even when my father wasn't paying child support, she did not go after him.
Wow.
So, I just, yeah, I just had these, yeah, I just had a hard time with
a
that.
lot of people
And
failed you.
so,
A lot of people made you feel not important, it sounds like you weren't the priority.
yeah, I asked my grandmother like right before I went to school, because she was a Bible doctorate. She taught at a college, and I was said, "Hey, I would really like to go to school. I just need help co-signing on some loans." And she said, "Why would I do that?" And I said, "Well, don't you even respect the fact that I'm trying to get an education?" And she said, "Respect you? Why would I?" She said, I would co-sign on a car, because if you defaulted on the loan, I could sell the car and get my money back. I would co-sign on a house for you, because if you defaulted, I could sell the house and get my money back. She's like, but if I co-sign on your education, you default. Like, that's just a bad investment on my part.
Wow.
So that happened, it's just like that happened. And So
So, Ron, your mom had divorced Ron, and is that the last person that she was with until she got married this time?
no, we're out. We have one more.
Oh, okay.
And so she, I had, I had a, I also had a really tragic dating life. At what I've had at that point, I think I was on my second boyfriend, and we had broken up. And so my mom came, like, flew me to Texas, and we both celebrated and commiserated our breakups and divorces together for about a week. And then I came home. And then she met Phil. And
Yep.
so that marriage lasted for a while. And again, like, things started coming up, and he wanted more out of my mom than my mom was able to give. And I get this phone call, and I end up spending an hour and a half at this party in a spare bedroom crying on the phone with my mother because she's once again getting a divorce. And it's just like, it was just so defeating, you know? Because once again, it's just like, I kind of like, I always got my hopes up for her because I so desperately wanted her to be happy. She said, first and foremost, I love you very much. I don't think I've ever really shown you a great example of what love looks like and what relationships can be or should be. She said, I've tried my hardest to like find men in the right way. And, and she's like, I just don't know what way that would be. She's like, all I want for you is to be happy. All I want for you is to be safe. All I want for you is to be loved. And she's like, and if that's a man, then that's what I want for you. So if you'll come here, she's like, I've got you. I love you. And it'll be okay. And she's like, and by the way, I was just
Yep.
like, well, I was like, what about religion though? Like up until this point, like we've not talked about that either. Like, what would Christ say about it? Like, and she said, I really thought about it, and like her whole demeanor changed after she got back from Iraq. She was a lot more invested in me. One night she had a couple of glasses of wine and she was like, so what is your ideal kind of guy? She started asking me questions. And so when I asked her about the religious part, she looked at me and she said, I don't think that I was raised like in the correct way. I don't think I raised you in the correct way. She's like, I feel like she's like, I can't say I'm sorry for how I raised you, but I can say I'm sorry that you're hurt. She said, I did the best that I had
Yeah.
with what I knew.
And now she's remarried, right? In back in Texas, and she seems to be doing well.
Oh my gosh.
I love that for her.
I love her husband.
Good.
He is so sweet, so kind. Like, he and I aren't close. I think at this point he realizes that I just don't need another person trying to be my dad right now.
Yeah. I get that.
And so, yeah. Um, and then I just want to touch on this, and I know I said before that I would, but I have never seen a father figure. Whew. Um, Meeting Kyler was really good. And then I remember you called me one day and you asked me to help you move some furniture. And I'd never had anybody else's parents reach out to me and think of me and include me in a plan.
Yeah.
And you were so gracious about, you know, as long as it's okay with my son, because, you like the way that you show love to your son and the way that you have such joy in your voice when you talk about your son was really confusing at first and like really hard and for me to accept when you were nice to me because I was just like,
Mm.
well, I'm not your kid and like I'm like never really been anybody's kid. So it took a long time for me to trust that like the kindness that you were showing me was legitimate. but you've never once been angry with me. You've never once, like, tried to say, well, I've done something for you. Like, I did this for you, so you owe me this. And so, yeah, that was really, it's been really awesome to see, like, actually, like, what a father-son relationship could be. And I've tried, I always feel like I never want to close the door on anybody. I try to remain positive. I try to remain open. And so even when my father actually ended up getting a divorce from his wife, um, it's just never really been the same. I feel like, from 13 to 30, 31, it's kind of hard to build that back up.
Yeah.
And so here I am today.
Yeah. Well, I want to say something. First of all, thank you for the compliments. My son does mean the world to me, of course, and you're a huge part of his happiness, so you're a huge part of mine. But I feel so bad because listening to this podcast, Nigel, I knew little tidbits, but I had no idea from start to now, all the struggles you'd went through. And I think I should have probably quizzed you a little more or talked to you a little more. And so
No,
I really
mean,
need to apologize
I
for that. I'm
no,
sorry.
yeah. Thank you. I have like a hard time actually learning not to say I'm sorry at everything but to actually accept compliments. And so that's been a big struggle of mine because of all this. But actually, so thank you, Scott. Actually, thank you very much.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
Because, Nigel, I think you should know this at this point. Um, Scott has always, we started really, really talking, what, 3 years ago, Scott? Like,
Yeah,
deeply,
probably. Yeah.
daily, several times a day. And he'd always say, my kids, my
He
kids,
does
my
that.
kids. Yeah. And it's you and Kyler. Those are his kids. He's like, my kids.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's just a normal thing. It like just slides out. And I think based on what you're saying, I think it's really, first of all, I think he doesn't think a thing about it when he
No,
says it. It's like, yeah, this is normal. And for you to now trust in that, I think is
trying to trust,
really
choosing to trust, trying to trust, choosing to trust. Like, I still feel a lot of guilt, like, sometimes when Scott is so generous, I don't necessarily always feel like I deserve it, or sometimes I'm like, well, this is only happening because he's doing this for his son, and I'm just here with him. And I know that that's, like, at this point in my life, I've done a lot of work over the last several years of really putting it to myself, like, I am a great person. I have a lot to offer. Like, if my grandparents don't want to be a part of my
Sure.
life, if my dad doesn't want to be a part of my life, and unfortunately, all these stepdads, I wish I could have known as a child that was their problem and their insecurity and their own thing. And that, like, at the end of the day, I'm good. And if you don't want to share in the joy and, like, what I am and who I am, then, like, that's none of my business, and that's just sad for them. So I have this thought process. I've been trying to work on it, but it does pop up. But no, I know at the end of the day that Scott, that, like, refers to me that way and thinks about it that way, and probably for the first time in a very long time, hanging out with him and hanging out with, I don't know where we are in release of things, but Scott's girlfriend per se. I don't know if
his future wife.
Yeah.
There we go.
We
I didn't know
talked
the
about that.
order of when
Future wife,
these.
yeah.
I didn't know if that got
Yeah.
mentioned in the thing, but just spending time with them on vacation is probably the first time I felt like I was on a family vacation where I felt like I was a part of a family. I felt involved. I felt connected with.
Oh, that's a huge compliment, Scott, for you and Ellen.
Yeah,
You
I know.
know,
I'm getting emotional now.
well,
Damn
what
it,
I want to
Connie.
say to Nigel is, I'm so sorry you're going to have to deal with this the rest of your life. I'm
Yeah.
I'm teasing. I'm totally teasing.
I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of divorce, so maybe,
Uh.
maybe I can get out of this relationship. Be like, sorry, Kyler, we have to get a divorce because I can't stand your dad anymore.
No. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, Nigel,
Uh.
I don't really have any more questions because I think your story, there's so many aspects to it.
Mm-hmm.
As the child of divorce and not being seen or having, like you said, here's the thing, religion, I think, has control, shame, and guilt issues attached to it in and of itself. And I think, unfortunately, you had to deal with that as a child, which isn't fair.
Yeah.
And I hope as an adult you move forward, like you've said, I'm learning these things, and too bad for those men who didn't get your gift. That's on them.
Absolutely.
And I have loved hearing how you've dealt with this and who you are, knowing who you are a little bit, the few times we've met. But
Mm-hmm.
you've dealt with some shit
Yeah.
and you've come out really cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
you have.
And like, if there was like a cap off, a finishing statement of that is, I'm so lucky also to have the mother that I have. She never left me. She never,
That is so true.
the situations weren't always perfect, but I think about my life right now and where I'm at, and thinking about how old my kids would be if I was her, and the problems I have, and like, you start to realize that your parents, she was 22 and had 2 children and she was divorced.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side of things, there's a lot of grace to be given there. A lot of like understanding, forgiveness. I really feel like she did the best she could, and I honestly don't think that she could have done any better. I think like I love her so much. And then on the other part of it, it's like people have asked like, "Oh, wouldn't you go back and change it, or like if you could make it different?" And I just don't think so. I think the hardships have shown me like when I love someone, I love them hard. Um, I work really hard. I'm really independent. I always want to make sure that I'm doing my best. Now that I have a partner, I know what it looks like to not have that support. And so I try my best, not perfect. I've got issues, my own thing. So, but I always just try really hard to not repeat those things. I feel like if I were to go back and change something or make it different or maybe have a better, I don't know what that would look like today. And I think it's a weird thing to think about. And so as much as I enjoy who I am as a person right now. And I don't know that I would be that person if these things hadn't happened.
I agree.
Yes.
You are who you are because of that.
Hmm.
Well, Nigel, thank you so much for the story. Really. Wow. This is so much more than what I thought we were going to get, to be quite honest. I appreciate you being so open, and I appreciate your mom. I know you talked to her about it, allowing you to tell the story or being okay with it, because it's a tough story. But I mean, just so you know, Nigel, I mean, we've got so many listeners out there, and I really do hope that somebody hears this and at least knows that there's hope down the road.
Absolutely. I always want to be so transparent as much as I can because, there's a reason that I had to go through this. There's a reason. And if that reason is offering anybody support or solidarity or just the feeling of not being alone in their situations when it's such a hard situation to talk about and connect with. So I thank you for having me. Was really excited and grateful for the opportunity to share this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And we've loved having you. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Our Life Beyond. We really hope that you found our discussion insightful and inspiring, or at least brought a smile to your day. If you did enjoy this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform and leave us a review. For more information, resources, or show notes, visit our website at ourlifebeyond.com. You can also follow us on social media. Search for us on Facebook at Our Life Beyond. We would love to hear from you, our listeners, so feel free to reach out with your questions, comments, or suggestions through our Contact Us page at ourlifebeyond.com or on social media. And once again, thank you for joining us on this journey. Till next time, remember, life beyond any challenge is possible, and we're here to navigate it with you. Stay strong, stay positive, and keep moving forward.